recording now.
All right.
So,
Um,
oh, you go with what you were going to ask.
no, I was just gonna say like figuring out what, and I'm gonna turn off this light. Um, and do this one. What are we talking about? Like I'm oh boy, that's even worse. It's like um I'm really into just having a discussion and walking through things. I'm assuming you saw the materials on the schema.org blueprints module that I recorded already.
No, I haven't actually.
You haven't,
So
so
let
you
me,
got to give me the context. Where are you coming
yeah.
from?
So let me give you the context where we come from. So, um, I'm creating don't know the right name for it now because there's a whole distributions initiative thing going on, but I've created what I call it is a starter kit called Foundry, and
Okay.
it's one of the problems we've always had with distributions is if the distribution decides it wants to go in a direction that's not what you're doing, it always become like
Hmm.
that's a point where you basically have to fork because it's going to cause issues when you try and do upgrades or anything. So the
Yeah.
idea of Foundry is that it's a good starting point for a project with a lot of things already set up, but from there you create your own content types and everything. There's some there, but we're probably going to remove some of those and make them more wizard driven, so they're not just created by default. But essentially, it's a composer project that installs a website using the packaged configuration within Foundry. So
Okay.
it doesn't have any addition, like all of the modules that are in it are just contribs, and it's just configuration at the moment. There's no glue code at the moment. There's no Foundry related modules. It's all just packaged together stuff that's from the community. And what we want it to be is a really good way for developers to create content types. So having a good experience for that. So rather than having to just go and add all of the individual fields and everything, I'm
Hmm.
kind of hoping that schema.org module will do a lot of that heavy lifting. I'm not sure. I mean, I've known about the whole schema.org stuff since, Drupal 7 days. I
Yeah.
know there was stuff, but I never really looked at it.
Okay.
So that's where I come from at the moment.
And I mean, for me with this project, I've learned this kind of thing. Even with distributions, it's kind of like, are there like high level goals, like three? With I'll give an example. When Acquia did Lightning,
Mm-hmm.
they said our four pillars are we're going to figure out media, workflows, layout, and I'm forgetting the fourth one. But
Yeah.
their idea was to have those goals of like we're going to have a distribution that brings together these things that are not working well in the community or
Yeah.
not fully there.
Yep.
And it was successful for that. Now they've deprecated and moved on to Acquia CMS, which is to showcase. They might not say it, but it's to showcase their products
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yep.
sell those products, and to give you modules that they support.
Mm-hmm.
So with this distribution, is there kind of like pillars or goal like are for content authoring or using the Gin admin theme to provide the best
Yes.
admin user
Yeah. So
experience?
it's Gin. We're using layout paragraphs to give good
Hmm.
control over layout. It's all paragraph driven. Um, Long term, we may replace the admin interface with JavaScript front end to further improve the editorial experience. But at the moment,
Hmm.
the main pillars is good editorial experience and good content type building experience for administrators.
All right. I mean, we're getting to the content type stuff because that's exactly what I'm after.
Mm-hmm.
And one note about distributions, which I think is, I really like Contenta as a model for the best distribution out there.
Yep.
And frankly, I wouldn't use it. And the statement there is they've done such a good job that it's a fork and go
Yes.
distribution.
Yep.
So for someone with not a lot of Drupal experience, they should start from there. But for me, I look at it and I go, oh, this is the 80% I need. The 80% modules that are ridiculously well thought out, maintained,
Yep.
and I need to copy these five configuration files, and I've got a good headless start for a headless distribution.
So that's the other
Um,
thing for us is it's a headless first for the front end. So
mhm.
Stuart, who I invited to the call, but he's busy with other stuff at the moment, is the primary developer of Druxt. I don't know if you've heard of that yet, but Druxt is a
Okay.
view-based sort of do Drupal
Oh
stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's next. Wait, Drux is next, right?
No, Druxt is Nuxt. So the Uxt. So it's Vue and Nuxt,
Yeah,
but there
yeah,
is a
yeah.
Next-based similar product.
Okay,
Yeah. So Drux,
okay. Drux.
Drux.org if you want to have a look. But yeah.
Oh,
So
it's druxjs.org. Okay,
yes, yeah, that'll be it.
all right.
And
Oh wait, and that's deciphered. That's your.
yes, yeah, he works with me
All right,
at Reality
all
Lab.
right. Got it. I've known him. He's been around for a long time.
Yep. Yeah, we both, I think, have been
Yeah.
roughly the same amount of time on Drupal.org. But yeah, um, like my main contributions have been sort of helping the mentoring effort. So I've like helped kickstart that when like I reframed how they did that at cons to not kill the Wi-Fi and stuff like that.
All
So
right. Yeah.
um,
Okay.
yeah,
So no, this helps me a lot. Where I'm sitting with what I'm working on is somewhere between progressively decoupled.
okay,
Meaning I know everything's going to be headless, but at the same time, I feel like the right architect, like when you're building modules in Drupal, you want to kind of sit right in the middle. Where if someone wants to have a twig front end, they might, or they might want to use Layout Builder to create a presentation that then goes headless.
yes,
Because that's
yeah,
one of the challenges that we're all struggling with.
yep,
Um, and the goal is just, yeah, to speed up the content creation process. I mean, I have to speed up the content creation process, and I have three pillars that I'm after: is structured data, APIs, and SEO.
mm-hmm.
And schemas the structured data, and APIs is basically saying if you take the schema.org spec and make that your API, you got good APIs.
Yeah.
And the SEO is you have just own LT. I could share my screen, so you haven't seen anything.
I installed the module and saw there was a heap of submodules, and I'm like, what do I need to say to enable
Okay,
to get things happening?
so
And
let's. Okay, the it's gonna be like I'm gonna start with like the full demo. So I definitely I also was like I'm using Gin admin theme and I want a great content authoring experience.
yeah,
So when I'm demoing this module, I'm not gonna start simple. I'm gonna start with like the most beautiful, best experience I can offer.
yeah,
And as I'm going through it, I'll explain to you why the submodules exist
okay,
in different
perfect.
areas. So
Yep.
that should help. I'll share my screen.
All right, so I'm switching over. I'm going to stop my camera just so we get the full screen of.
Yeah. Okay. So an interesting thing is that I'm struggling with is, and I have Drush right here. You can see my Drush window.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to actually, while we're talking, I'm going to do I have like a little personal OSX command. And
Yep.
if I do OSX install devel, I'm going to get a clean install.
Okay.
Now, what I'm doing, and I'll show code while that's going on, is I'm doing a clean Drupal install off the standard profile. And to do my demos, you're doing a distribution, but I decided I don't want to maintain a distribution. So I created this like schema.org _ standard module. And all it does is set up a demo.
Yep.
And it's like a distribution, except I'm not exporting all that config,
Yeah.
which is a nightmare. So, but if I show you the info file, you'll see that it's like really opinionated on what it's doing. It's basically installing content authoring experience and API stuff to get documentation. And a module I do really like is config rewrite, because what that allows you to do is have just these are the 7 files I need to change.
Okay, nice. Yeah.
To get the demo that I'm going to show you, I'm just changing a few things. I'm basically taking that the WYSIWYG editor and saying, give it the ability to embed content, because I really like that pattern. I'm not 100% a fan of paragraphs in the sense of, if you have a blog post and you want to put a slideshow in the middle of the blog post, I believe you should drop the slideshow in the middle of the text and not break it into 2 paragraphs, because then someone has to reconstruct something. All right. So what that just did in the command line, and I'm going to keep coming back to command line, is this is I was just working on this today. I'm just setting up a dashboard using the dashboards module. This is not, I got to emphasize something. The goal of the module is you install the schema.org module and the UI, you set up your content types, and that's it. All the other things are just gravy to make things pretty.
Yeah.
And like, to give you SEO and APIs. So that's, and so there's a reports module. And the way I built the reports module so that in the report section, I have about schema.org, and it pulls the data from schema.org and gives this was how I learned how schema.org works. I got their CSV into Drupal and I created a browsable version of all their data points.
Nice.
And if I go back to this, I could say I want to look at movies, and I could look at movies here and understand it. And I even am tracking my research when I'm thinking about movies. I can look at this and be like, oh, what's the structured data they're recommending for movies?
Mm-hmm.
And come over here and read up on it. And this is Google structured data, which for the record, I am not targeting Google's structured data, because my feeling is what you want is schema, and Google is a subset. And if something's off in your schema, you'll just enhance it a little bit. Like if they are saying use this field instead of that field, you'll change it when you render the JSON LD for Google.
Yep.
But you should stay true to schema. And I'm starting to get my tips in order and think those things out. But this created a whole browsable list. And then at the bottom, I'm storing some metadata to basically say, here are all the properties. And there's a reason I do this, because there's a lot of configuration here. So I want lists of all the properties for different types, because I might be adjusting them. I also realized we needed to start ignoring certain properties, because it gets overwhelming. And some of everything I say here is configurable. So important. And that might be the biggest challenge to using this module, is like, I'm going to get really good default configuration, but if someone wants to get their hands dirty, they got to understand what's going on. So I'm going to now jump over to just start building some content, and then I'm going to start really building some content. So the demo I do, and it's like a 5-minute takeover of a website, is as simple as going into media, and I say I would like to edit the image. I go over to fields, and I go to a schema.org tab, because this entity already exists. So I have configuration to say, if there's media image, I would like to map it to the schema.org image object. So you come here, it's green because we're taking all the existing fields and mapping them to schema fields. This is schema on the left and Drupal on the right. And it found everything. And all you do is you hit save. And the reason I'm doing this is now when I start building content types, I know that I have image objects available. On a similar vein, paragraphs. So basically what we got to do is build one of the challenges, you got to build the smaller pieces before you build the larger pieces. So when I go to paragraph types and I jump around, but this adds add schema.org type to the paragraph types. I go here, contact points, the only one I need to do this demo. And now it starts building things out. This is also completely configurable. All these decisions here are being done in configuration in Drupal. There's some because these are all text fields. And in Drupal, I'm mapping them to different things. So you start seeing that pattern kick in. Okay, we have our contact point. Now we could start taking over content. So we have our default content types. I can go to here. This is all configurable. What I did is a quick start. And the goal here is you can go from left to right, and it'll work as you would expect. For example, you need a place for a person to live, so you have to create places first. And once again, you see a couple of highlighting of things. Let's just slow down for a second. This points to the schema.org type. If you click, you get a dialog. This is, if you don't have reports installed, it just goes to schema.org. It goes to this page on schema.org. But it gives you a way to see what's going on. And you might realize you want more specificity. You can even browse around in here and be like, well, actually, I don't want to create a place. I want to create a accommodation, and I want to switch to that, and it'll switch over. I can even do that here. So, okay. And I'm also working on these patterns. This is basically the content type add form, where you can add the name, machine name. I am not dynamically generating machine names because I want people to see them. Description. There's a schema.org descriptions module that basically cleared this field value. If I didn't have it on, this would have the default description from schema.org, but it leaves it blank because when it's blank, this module automatically populates it. And the benefit is it gets really good with fields, because if you have the same field over and over again, you don't have to enter the description over and over again. It's all coming from a central place. And if they update the description, it's there. This filter, so there's this toggle here, and I'm going to leave subtyping for a little later. lets you see all the fields, and the UI here is basically you're in the add field form. So if we said we wanted to give an alternate name to this place, you could go in here and say add field. There's configuration to say if you're going to enter an alternate name, it'll be plain text, and you most likely will want to enter in multiple alternate names.
Mm-hmm.
When I slide this
So
out,
unlimited
you
is
see
just the cardinality of the field, basically.
yeah,
Yep.
and I'm breaking. Now this is pretty close to, like how the field edit form. This is the only extra property I felt was important. Required, you can go back in. The goal is to set you up so you have a perfect data structure, and then you can go wild and tweak the hell out. Excuse me?
Oh. I'm recording a video. Sorry about that.
Okay, I can't see your video, so I don't know if it was a kid or something. But anyway.
It was.
Okay. I know those. I have two. I'm going to keep going, and I also just want to show you there's this feature to do filtering. So if you type phone, you'll get all the phone fields. And
cool.
Frankly, we just have telephone or fax. Yep. Just meant to help people browse around. We could add a fax number. Once again, it automatically figures it out. Mm-hmm. Ignored properties, it's just saving time, because this stuff is so specific. Most people don't need to use it.
Yeah.
Okay. Hit save. All right, now I'm going to go fast. We're going to basically build an organization. This remembers the state, so if I collapse it, it even gets faster. Mm-hmm. I'm creating an organization. I'm going to hit add schema type. We can create a person. Now we create a person, and now it starts, something you'll start seeing is alumni of, it figures out that we have an organization, so it does an entity reference to content, and when it builds it, it sets the target bundles to what's on the site. There's some nuances there, and I'll show that. These are the challenges I'm starting to work out, because it's a chicken or egg situation, because sometimes there's fields in here that could be pointing to another person. So you got to sort that out. I'll show you a report that I'm working on. Lastly, I'm going to go to event, because it's a good example of subtyping. So events, I've configured it to have subtyping on. What that means is in schema, all of these subtypes underneath event don't really have any extra level of specificity in terms of extra properties. Mm-hmm. The type is the specificity that you're saying you have a sales event or a screening event. Yeah. So in some cases, it makes sense to just be like, I'm subtyping, just so you can, I'll save it. When I go to the add form, you get a little drop down. And what this does is it propagates through, so now this event is a business event.
Yeah.
It's, and I am going down all the way. And what's great is you can pick any subtype and the data will be accurate for schema.org's purposes, because you're not adding, it just works. Let's generate some content. Okay. This is where generating stuff is a pain. You got to do images first. I'll throw 50 in there. Okay. Now go back up. We'll generate content. Oh, and I didn't do this, but this is another pattern. I think it's worth a minute on this. And by the way, it's my favorite content types. So if you go into content types, similar to what you saw me do with media image, if I go to article and I go to manage fields, it maps it automatically to schema.org's article, and then just adds a few extra properties. And what's great here, this one's very clean because it's an article, but I love web page because it shows it. Let's get here. Sorry. I'm going to go back up. Right. I'm going to go to basic page. Yeah. It maps to web page. By default, only has title and body, but because it's a web page, I'm like, wait, add primary image of a page, which is beautiful. I love schema.org because that's the right label for a field.
Yeah.
That tells you exactly what's going on. And then related link and significant link to me is so brilliant, because you need to distinguish between what's like, it's related versus this is significant. This link, and if I was personalizing content, I would never touch significant links, but I would touch related links.
Yep.
So I hit save. Now we have that here. One of the reasons I went back to do that is now I can check this box and go crazy generating content. Okay. So I've generated the content. Now we can go in here and we've got our content types set up, our fields, our relationships. Let's slow down here and walk through what's going on. There's code. If the field group module is installed, it will build field groups for you that you specify. So it starts grouping the information together in logical groups.
Yep.
So there's general information, there's media, there's event information. And then at the bottom, these are preview modules. So there's a preview of JSON API. I pulled this from Contenta and just sorted it out.
Yep.
There's even a feature here, if I get it right, this patch has to go into core. There's metadata linking to the JSON LD. That's where we're getting into the headless decoupled. So you can go to this URL and get your JSON LD packet perfectly here. And there's also a preview, and this also remembers the state of the preview. So if I collapse this, it'll stay collapsed. And here's a preview of the JSON LD for this event. Something I'm struggling with is how far down do you go with the data? There's a general rule with Google where they only want you to put the data that's visible on the page in the JSON LD. There might be a way to rectify that where we say, well, for an organization, we link to it and we don't put the attributes. That might be the compromise. I have not sorted this one out. But the other part at the top is a way to test and show that this is working. I can copy this. I can pull up schema.org validator. Every time I demo this fails.
Didn't copy the right.
Not if it has something to do with when a screen capture software is going, it's unhappy that I'm trying to do this. Give me a second to see if I get it blows my mind because I can't reproduce it if we're not in a video. Oh, the easiest thing to do is I go like this, Control C. Now we're here. That should. Yeah, see it. There's a weird thing happening because of that example. Maybe if I view source, let's see. There we go. Perfect.
Yep.
So you got your perfect structured data going on there. Now, I'm going to show you rapid building of content types so let's talk about some of the challenges. There's a lot of, you got to think about the order that you're creating these pieces to build the right content type. So that's a challenge. And also configuring it.
Required parent, basically.
Yep. So before I go there, I do want to, let's see, do you have any questions?
I do.
What you saw so far?
So the first thing that came up was, what if some of these types of content shouldn't have, like you're creating primarily nodes at the moment, but we find often some of this content might not ever be displayed as a full node view. And so we would normally end up then creating it as maybe, so recently we found storage. I'm not actively using it yet, but storage potentially, or a paragraph maybe. Depends on if it's reused or not.
So yeah, absolutely. We can even go into that for a second. So we didn't, you're asking that question and we didn't go into, yes, I agree with using storage. I kind of lean toward personally nodes and then paragraphs. In most cases, because all the content, when you talk about a piece of content that doesn't have a page, but it has to have a relationship somewhere. And if you use the paragraphs library, you kind of get the best of both worlds. And we can go to a person here. So we have a person. Let me make sure they have a contact point. So they have a contact point. And this is, I did not go to the node edit form. So I am using Gin admin theme. I am all about the best possible user experience. So I am trying to do 3 patterns here. Embed. So you can embed. So I have media embed, but then you can embed other nodes inside of here. And I want to emphasize so when you start going through the modules, what you're going to see is I have all these submodules because they're encapsulating a small pattern. There's a schema.org JSON LD embed module. And what that does is it reads the body and says, oh, there's embedded content in the body. Let me get the JSON LD for that. But it's a small module, so you can turn it off. Let's keep going here and talk about, so media. The other pattern I have here is, okay, let's get to contact point. This demo has libraries turned on so I can promote this and reuse this content.
Okay,
And that I
nice.
like this
Yeah.
pattern a lot.
Yeah.
It it how'd you put it? It doesn't create a polluted space of floating content,
Mm.
but when you need something
You
floated,
can,
you
yeah.
know, you need something reused, the paragraphs library is a really solid approach. Um, I mean, I know one bug in there that I've seen is when I click on, let's see, if I click here, okay, yeah, they're still working out some of these kinks. And
Mm.
if I remove this, oh, here, if I, let's keep it here and then say I would like to add from library
Mm.
the select a reusable paragraph, this filter, it's everything.
Yeah.
You can't say just
Just
contact
show me the
points. So
ones
that's a
of the
little,
right type. Yeah.
it's a little tricky,
Mm.
but still, also paragraphs has the largest user base, and that's where I think
Mm.
it's worth the investment.
Yeah.
Um, the oh, and then the other one, I did look at micro content and storage.
Mm-hmm.
Those have titles. It sucks because these pieces of content do not need titles.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. You never ever. So that's where paragraphs is excelling really well,
Mm.
and you always need it revisionable.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
another. So okay, so we're there. There's not much else to talk about with the authoring experience here. I'm going to go to configuration, then we're going to do this again, and you'll see we're going to do movies.
Mm-hmm.
So when I talk about configuration, I want to go, okay, I want to throw down out of the box. Most entities are supported. You can turn them on and off. Like when you install, if you have the block module, makes it possible when you're in block types, you can add a schema.org type to blocks. You can also take the basic block, same pattern, and map it to, what did I do? Web content.
Mm-hmm.
It's supporting, let me just, out of the box, block, media, paragraphs, taxonomy because they have defined terms.
Yep.
So if you go to tag, we'll avoid that one for now, and regular content types. In the admin settings, I moved it over to search and meta data. You go over to search.org. So this is tracking everything we just did. Everything we just created is right here. If I need to understand, I need to edit it, I can go over here and look at it. It's also tracking, if I say show details, it's showing me the details of it. I'm also tracking APIs. So there's a schema.org JSON API module that has an opinion that you should only share schema.org data in your APIs by default. And if you
Mm-hmm.
want something else, you would explicitly say it. So when I go in, and I recommend this if anyone's watching this, because I've done bad APIs, when you create your JSON APIs, check where is this box? Disable by default. So this shuts down all your APIs until you explicitly turn them on.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that module does, it actually has requirements checking to be like, it's like, have this checked. Because then what it does is as you're creating your types, it'll go in. Let's say we go to the event and hit edit. It's only exposing a few fields that I disabled these, by the way.
Mm.
It's exposing language code because it matches to in language. Status doesn't have a corresponding relationship to schema, but we know we have to always have that.
Yep.
But then it maps this all to schema.org field name. So you've got a ridiculously clean API, and it shows. I mean, I burned myself with APIs, and this is just, and it's also generating an include statement to help you drill down and get all the data
Mm-hmm.
in here. And this is all I got to emphasize, this is all alpha.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
That was one of the other questions. Is like, what state is it ready for use in production?
well, you see, the key thing is once the mapping's created, that's all you need to care about, and the rest of the things can shift around you. So you're going to go tweak your content types once they're created, and the mapping should never change. So it's kind of stable. If you're a developer and understand the inner workings, you're fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's not, there's not going to be a lot of breaking things. What might change is when you go to create a new content type in a later version of the schema.org blueprints module, it's going to do it a little differently.
Yeah.
But that you just have to be mindful of and pay attention to it. Mapping types are the definitions to say, I would like to map. And let's just look at media for a second. If I go to edit it, this is the recommended if you're going to add a media type, which actually isn't working. That list, when I went to content, I'll use content. You have full control over it. That's the
Yeah.
quick start. And this is where all the comma delimited fields come in. And then these are the default schema types that map it. And you're starting to see the patterns. Like I'll put a pipe in. These are the default properties for creative work. There's a global default properties. And then here are the schema.org types that support subtyping. Here are the base fields mappings when it's a pipe and blank. I don't love these patterns, but to create a UI for all this configuration could be a project unto itself.
Especially when it's primarily a developer and facing thing anyway. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, and I'll get dirty in a second to say that. And then here's all the field groups. The label is general. Here are all the schema.org properties that you want. And then here's some settings, whether you want to use details or not. And let's just quickly look at configuration, and I'll make it a lot bigger when I get there. Yeah, I edit most of this stuff in configuration because if I go over here, it's just YAML. This is actually easier. I struggle with this. This is easier to edit for a developer.
Yep.
But if I put it in a UI and a site builder goes in, they could really burn themselves or have problems
totally
and get confused.
Yeah.
So I struggle with that. From here, let's just go back up out of this. I'm going to get to demos in a second, but we'll go to settings. Settings are just the global settings. And basically, most of the time, you can just globally say what your default schema.org type properties are. So, for example, for a news article, I want the date line, print column, print edition, print page, print section. This supports inheritance, so it makes it very easy to maintain. So creative work is a primary, article is a subtype of creative work, so therefore article has language. I hope you kind of have to experiment and get used to the pattern. Sometimes I'm experimenting with default properties. So if you have an offer, I'm going to add a price currency property to that because I assume it's a currency value.
Yeah. So would
then
this be, because we're in Australia, we would come in and edit this to be AUD or something?
Yep. Or we would write code to detect it and set the value when you install.
Okay. Yep.
Which would be actually not the worst idea. The default field types, that's when you go and say, I want to add an image object, it's saying use the media, or use, if media is installed, use media. If not, use image. If not, use link.
Yep.
And then these are more advanced. And this is stuff, my goal is to get these right enough. And you're going to see the demo. How much time do you have? You have 20 more minutes, right?
I hope. Heaps of time. There's no issue for me. So.
Okay. All right. So, you got to keep in mind, you're the first person that I've sat down and showed all this configuration. But what I struggled with is this is the only way to do it. You have to plan this out. And I don't think most people need to edit this configuration. If it's close enough, if it gets someone 80% there, the goal would be they'd say, add an event, and here are the extra fields I want to add. And there's a lot of algorithms to when they go to add those extra fields, it should figure out, well, the field data type is an integer, so let's use an integer and recommend an integer and a list integer as a value.
Yep. I did notice, I'm pretty sure I saw on the module page it supports smart date as well. Or?
I haven't set the configuration up. I actually backed away from that. What I found is with integrations, doing a dedicated module off to the side helps the most because it inline entity form. I set up, so I haven't done smart date. But keep in mind, if you had smart date installed, you could go in here and say smart date.
Yes, yeah.
And by the way, I can make this bigger. I didn't even.
No, it's fine. I can read it easily.
Yeah, I know. I like it, but you could change this to smart date. This does figure it out. Like if you set a field type, I have a couple ones in here that are okay. Let me see. Oh, I have an opinion that address is installed on most sites.
Yeah.
So I did put address here. If it's not there,
text.
It switches to text.
Yeah.
So I have a schema.org paragraphs module. And what this does is it's a list of these are the types that should use the paragraphs library.
Cool. Yeah.
So it gives us a little more control because it could get out of control if every single time you create a paragraph, it assumes you're going to use a paragraphs library. And it sets up the configuration when you create these. And you could see I've explored a lot more types.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's go up to the top. Properties, similar things. These are, if you're creating a how-to step, the definition, the range includes, which is the schema.org spec for what are the possible values, is so broad
Mm-hmm.
that this just allows us to set a little more specificity to say, okay, for a how-to, you either are doing a how-to step or a how-to section. And if you're in a how-to section list, item list, it's only ever a how-to step.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a bit of a pain, but like image gallery, if you're creating an image gallery, you use has part to, that's how you define your image, your slideshow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay, so these are the ignored properties. These are, this is the most verbose one because these are like default definitions for different properties. So when I go in to create media gallery has part, I'm going to change the label because I don't want it to say has part. I want it to say media, and I want it to be unlimited.
Yep.
And it's a great example where YAML kicks in here. This is so much easier to maintain.
Yeah, to understand. Yeah. Yeah.
I might create a UI for this. So this is a real driver. I mean, has the most data.
Mm.
So it's doing all the nudging.
Yep.
It's like works for you. It has to be an unlimited field. I do have a whole algorithm to do naming. So because schema.org has a different spec. They have unlimited number of characters and they're using not snake case,
Camel
title,
case.
I don't know. I have it written down. I always get them confused.
Is it camel case?
But so
or not camel
it's
case?
it's camel case. It's lower camel case, or upper camel case, lower camel case. That's
Okay.
what it is.
Yeah.
And in the reports, and we'll move on to names. So this is storing all of the names, all the abbreviations, how it abbreviates schema.org. So it takes alignment and makes it the word align. And in reports, you can go over here and see, and this is something we, as a community, we just got to nail. We got to figure out how to take the 3,000 names and abbreviate them when needed. So I built this because I was like, I have to see what's going on.
Yeah.
And basically it shows us all the abbreviations. And I try to figure out, and I realize we just have to bite the bullet. I hate abbreviations, but there's no other way to do it. Because we're limited. I don't know, non-technically, it's 32 characters.
Yeah.
And there's code here to prefix every single schema.org field with schema underscore instead of field, because I feel that we're going to want to distinguish between the two. And it just helps when you're manipulating data to be like, this is a schema field. And frankly, you're never seeing this in the APIs.
Yep.
Because you're going to see API, you're going to see this value actually when you get to the API
Do you have
level.
many cases where you're adding fields that don't have a schema like equivalent?
No. I am so impressed by schema. And I'm leaning in this direction of the thing that I have to figure out, and I played with this module called Flex Field. We're going to have to, so if we want to do headless, you're going to have perfect data, but then you have to have configuration. So when you send a blog post out there, you might want to say, I would like this to be blue. That's not schema. That's like configuration settings. And what I like about the Flex Field module is it's basically like a field collection. It's very lightweight, and all it does is create a bunch of key value pairs.
Yep.
And I think in many use cases that could solve a ton of problems for people. The other perk of the key value pairs is it aligns with a lot of headless front ends. It's attributes.
Yeah.
You're basically building an array of attributes that you send to the client. And doesn't do entity references. It's directly on the field. So I would check out Flex Field. I was very impressed by it.
Cool.
There is a schema.org Flex Field module where I'm experimenting with doing addresses and nutrition information using a Flex Field. Because paragraph's a little heavyweight. You're just getting key value pairs. Finishing up here, let's see. Properties, names, mappings, types. Oh, I'm in the report. So I just want to make sure I don't lose you on it. So all those other submodules get their own configuration. So for descriptions, I'm saying trim the description. This allows us to change the description globally. And in these two cases with item list and main entity, there's no need for a description because it's useless. It's like not helpful because it's too generic. But
Okay.
then menu item offers, I realized for menus, you'd want to be very specific.
Yep.
JSON API, these are the two fields that are always turned on. I'm changing the Drupal internal names to be sensible, real API names.
Mm-hmm.
Don't call it node, call it content.
Yep.
There's requirement checking, and then that preview widget has visibility settings because it's attached to every page.
Mm-hmm.
I, I I felt I did not want to go node specific because then that's a problem.
Mm.
Your example, if you had the storage module, you'd want to see all this data for it.
Yeah.
Same thing with JSON LD. These are little settings to say, these are the property orders that I want. When I create an image, these are the image styles I want for these properties. When I'm creating those endpoints, this is the terminology I want to use. It closely aligns with the API.
Yeah.
And once again, you get the visibility. Demo, I'm going to come back to, but what you're seeing here is a list. Remember, I'm going to show you this because this is how I'm figuring out really complex schemas.
Mm-hmm.
Is all this is a required. So I'm basically saying every schema is going to need media image, media video, taxonomy terms, contact points in person.
Okay. Yep.
And then down below, they're getting into different levels of specificity, but these are in the correct order.
Mm.
And you can trigger it in Drush. That's what I'd like to have a UI, but the problem is if you in the UI you say, I want to create 7 entity types with 100 fields, you run out of memory.
Ah, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm working on it. It's there at Dual. I'm also keeping track of references.
Hmm.
So if I find interesting information about the article type, I'm tracking those articles or creative. So when we're trying to work out the details, we can go there and be like, how should education organization work? Okay. So the other thing, to go back to the report tab, which I have here, I go to mappings, and I don't love the name, but what this is doing is giving me this is a summary of all the possible types that could be created and their properties. It helps me understand what the right relationships are, that they're sorted correctly, that they're sorting. This is like one of those admin tools to help debug things. And then this shows all the possible properties that are these are all the expected properties. These are the properties that are sorted. These are the relationships. It's just to help me work things out. The other tab is relationships because you realize so this field tags. Oh, it got added to article. The expected I didn't go in and do the mapping right. So it's telling me that it can't figure out what the right schema.org type is, but it's pointing to tags.
Okay.
And so this is going to be a bug. I can fix this by actually going into taxonomy. When I said that to you before, manage fields, I take over this taxonomy and say it's a defined term, hit save, and I hit refresh. Yeah. And now it figured out that we're using the tags taxonomy for it. This also starts to help you make it possible to repair. There's a Drush command to repair relationships. Okay. If I could describe it, this is, here, look. Event organizer points to organization in person. Well, if you suddenly add a new subtype of organization to the site, the entity reference won't be updated. So you'd come here and you'd figure it out, or you got to think about your relationships. I did create like an entity reference selection handler that was dynamically figuring out these relationships, and it was unsustainable. It was too complex to maintain.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, this gives people full control, but while they can really know what their relationships are on their site. Okay, so let's go back to demos, because that's, if I go to demos, okay. So this is that information I showed you in the tab where, well, I'm going to set this up again. I'm blowing out the site. I'm going to start over. The idea is, this is how I'm like, okay, I want to target different sectors. So what we're going to do is we're going to do everything I just showed you in the few, that took 5 minutes to click in one command. It's just going to generate everything for us. And then we could go through, I like entertainment's really good because frankly, this shows people some incredible stuff for TV.
Yeah.
Because schemas figured this out. You have a TV series with a TV season and TV episodes, so it's just relationships. If I hit refresh, if we had a UI, they could just say, I would like to set up these. I'm calling them demos. I don't know the right term. It might be schema type groups or sets or something, but it's kind of hard to sort that out. But okay. So now we switch back to Drush. If I do, I'm going to do some Drush stuff here. I'm going to make this a lot bigger. Drush. If I go over here, we got a bunch of commands. There's an individual command to create and delete a type. So you can do that from command line. You could write a script that I would like to create this type, these sets of types, that set of types. But then there's this demo module where it does a demo generate. And if I go down here, I do Drush, schema.org, SO, demo, not generate. See, I get the wording. I decided to use the pattern of testing, and I'll go back here and explain why I got myself confused, but it's set up, tear down, generate, and kill. Okay. So set up and tear down creates, and generate and kill is the drush generate command. So I do drush, sod, schema.org, demo, setup, enter common. I'm going to say common, and create all of that work that we just did in the UI. That's done. And now I would like to generate content for it. I'm going to hit yes. I'm going to say common. And now it's just going through devel generate, and it's actually going in the right sequence. So the relationships are pretty good. This is the only one where I have to sort this out. It has to do with generating a relationship that doesn't exist yet. It's a kind of a devel generate issue. Now, if I go back, and frankly, if I refresh this, we're going to have a fully scaffolded site with all that, everything I just was clicking through manually. This dashboard doesn't automatically pick up all the types. You'd have to go here to add content, and I can actually kill this too. I can say tear down. And one of the patterns here is when I'm perfecting these schema types, I'll go into the I'll basically have a workflow where I'll go adjust the configuration. I'll look at it. I'll adjust the configuration, figure out what fields are missing, what's in the wrong order, adjust the YAML, tear it down, do a features import of the configuration, and then do another setup and kind of refine it as I go along. The entertainment one is really good to just do.
Do you have you done any testing for multilingual yet? Because paragraphs multilingual's not really, like, I was playing around with that the other day, and
oh really? Yeah. I've had paragraphs multilingual be okay. Like, I've done translations of pages that use paragraphs without any problem. You have to go, there's a weird setting that you have to be careful with. Oh, you know what? I'm using Lingotech, so they sorted out a lot of stuff.
Okay.
Where it's like,
I found a module the other day that does it, but you had to add an extra module. Basically, it means that at the time you create the translation, it copies the paragraphs but recreates them in that language, and you can edit them. But from then, any additions you make are only on that language's page.
Oh, I haven't seen anything like that. But I'm using,
which to me, like, I would never think that I would create a page with exactly the same paragraphs across two languages anyway. But
yeah, check with I think there's lots of ways to do it because the maintainers of paragraphs, they're in Switzerland or I think, and they're very into multilingual. They did a lot of TMS stuff, translation management system. I think they maintain that module too. So, one thing I can say is that, so schema.org is not translated. It's in English. That the description stuff, I am unsure how that's going to work because I can go in the weeds here for a second to say, if I go to my database, I'm storing the strings in the database, so they're not really, when I do all those descriptions and those replacements, like adding those, they're in the database. I think I'm going to have to pass them through the T function, but for the data to appear correctly, I'm probably stuck writing them to like a file, so that the Drupal localized.drupal.org picks up on these they're called comments. And but one thing to say is once you create those fields, they're just going to work as they expect. Like you have to start with English. That's definitely.
Well, that's not a
I
problem for
don't
me.
know how.
So.
Yeah. I don't know, but I come back to multilingual stuff all the time. It's not. There's nothing egregiously done here. That would be one way to put it. It's like with web forms, I learned my lesson. Like people correct. Yeah, oh, you can't do it that way. So I just want to walk through this really quick is it scaffold out a movie, like basic, like it's just really powerful because you could go in and say, I have a TV series test. You have trailers, images, seasons. You can select, so you can do entity references to your seasons. What I like is I'm using that other pattern. And this is where I think I'm getting close to being like, these are the patterns. It's like embedded content, paragraphs. But then if you start thinking about a TV season, in here, you'd say test, you want to use inline entity forms for the episodes. Because it just doesn't make sense to, episode 1, director Bob. Now you go in, it makes it so much easier to maintain like this. And frankly, we just have to hone. This is one of the challenges I found too. I got to say, when you're embedding other entities in another, you get this extra cruft that you have to I think you have to write custom code for. But this is incredible, this UI right here. Because now you could just say.
And just make a change. Yeah.
Episode 2. I mean, this is how you would manage episodes. It's just perfect. Go down, duplicate node. Yeah, it's really outrageous. I have never used inline entity form on a project because I launched an early site, but I think this is a great UI. Hit save, and there you go. Oh, and then you get your perfect
JSON. Yeah.
JSON LD. Just mapped out. I think I've just hammered you with everything I've got. The only other, let's see, so you're seeing a lot of configuration. You brought up modules. Yeah, there's a docs directory, and I'm keeping track of the modules and writing notes about them.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm trying to kind of create groups of them where, like there's a silly module, but it's not really silly. Like I'm kind of doing no holds barred in alpha because there's certain things or challenges that we're going to hit where we might need to explore. I created an export module where if I click download CSV, it gives us all the data we have in a nice simple format where here's the entity type, here's the bundle, here's the schema.org type, do I want subtype, and here's the properties. Theoretically, you could pump this into a drush command and use this to scaffold an entire site. Does that make sense? Like the concept, so, there's modules that are just experimenting with that. That's what the export, there's no import, there's an export.
Okay. Yeah.
And then, there's entities, fields. JSON LD I broke down into a lot of pieces because it just depends on the site. For example, I'm adding the breadcrumb. If you were not doing decoupled, you'd probably want the breadcrumb in your JSON LD if you're using traditional. So I made sure to move that into a separate thing. And I'm tracking modules in the community that I think are really important.
Yeah.
I'm definitely steering away from. I think the ecosystem is going to stay focused. I'm not going to support. Now I have my kid. Hold on a second.
That's all right.
What's up? What? Okay, you're on video in your underwear. Yeah. Yeah, he's fine. He's a dog. Oh, he did some damage? Okay. I don't know. We have a dog causing trouble. All right. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Um,
I know. I like. Okay. I got
so
totally distracted. Oh, the screen share stopped. Did it stop?
no, I'm still recording. Oh,
Oh, I think one of my side screens.
oh, there we go. Yeah, no, I can see
Yeah.
the IDE.
No.
Um,
Okay.
okay, so
Questions.
is it difficult to implement on a site with existing content types?
I'm on the fence on that one.
Okay.
It's definitely not. I think it can work,
Mm-hmm.
but it could be hard.
Yeah.
You might have to massage the data to get it to work. Like you could see I'm taking over existing content types. So
Yeah.
it definitely works.
Yeah.
Like you can go in and say, I would like, and there is a UI for that in the sense of there is a pattern here for it.
Mm.
I can show you the pattern. If I go in here and say, add content type, some random type, I'm just kind of mocking out that existing one. So we have our existing one. We do get a schema.org tab. And what it does is it comes in here and says, what would you like to do right now?
Yeah.
I would like to map this to an organization, but then you've got to figure out all your existing fields, which is available. Like you can do it. You have a drop down.
Mm.
So this is adding a new field, but you can go in and select your existing fields. But you can see, I think you get the real benefit when you start from scratch.
Yeah.
Because you really, the goal is to get clean data.
Yes. Yeah. Um,
And yeah,
would you mind? Have you used Gitpod at all?
it's on my to-do list, but I just haven't had the bandwidth.
Okay. Would you be happy to, like, I can spin up Foundry and we can just look at it quickly? Just because I think it would be useful for other people that may have a site existing and they want to implement it. So it'll be a site
Yeah,
with no content. It's just got three content types. Just to
yeah.
see if we add the module, what would happen.
Oh, you could see it's going to work. I mean, one of my visions here is that, okay, if you had a distribution, to me, the concept would be the distribution would install the module and trigger API calls to say, give me an event,
Yeah.
give me this, give me that. And you don't actually have it in configuration because one of the benefits of not having it in configuration is I'm only storing the bare minimum configuration.
Mm-hmm.
I'm generating it on the fly. So the example I'll give you for that. So like this approach has got some benefits is if I go to the inline entity form and how I set up that integration, I've got a lot of the hooks sorted out.
Yep.
So when someone's adding a schema.org property, you can go alter the field storage values, the field values, the widget for the form, the widget settings, the formatter, and the formatter settings. For inline entity form, I'm storing the bare minimum. So if they add new features or they change new features, it works perfectly fine. And if someone has entity browser in code, I can make decisions like that. So it would work with the distribution, but I think the approach in the distribution would be different.
Okay.
So let's spin up Foundry for a second.
Yep. I'm just getting a link.
Yeah. I'm gonna turn off my camera for 1 second because I gotta sort out
I
what
need to hang on. Composer require Drupal /schema.org.
What did my kid do? It's so funny. I have this is like a personal detail. This year I had brand new wood floors put into my office, and like he comes up and like leaves the tread of a wheel sitting in my office, and I'm like, which wheel is this piece missing from?
Can you
Because
access
if you don't have
that
the
link that
rubber.
I just sent?
Yep. All right. I'm back. I don't mind video. It's in the chat. Okay.
Yeah. I'm not sure if
And we're still sharing my screen.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, but I can't get in.
Okay, hang on. I can fix that.
Where did he get
All
this
right,
from?
so reload now. It should work.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I bandwidth to do all this stuff. It's kind of funny.
I'll give you a different link, which is...
Hey, puppy. Okay, let's see. Oh, okay. So what do
just
I
go
need to do?
continue with GitHub, probably. That was GitLab. So if you have a GitLab account, that'll work. Yeah.
It's kind of funny
either
that
should
they're
work.
promoting.
Yeah.
I am using Aqua's Cloud ID, which I am impressed by. That, VS Code in the cloud, it's pretty
That's what
cool.
Gitpod is as well. So it's very similar.
Yeah. I mean, I will still give a shout out to PHP Storm because it's just the code insight in PHP Storm it's just better.
Yeah.
It's really hard to replicate that functionality. Yeah, there's a tick in the web form issue queue to kind of spin up a Git pod for web form stuff, and I haven't had the time.
It's good when you're trying to show someone a bug, if you have an easy replicatable thing. I've done it before, and it definitely makes it easier. That's taking ages.
Should I?
Just wait.
Do not have a. Yeah.
Oh,
I know. I'll still close out a bunch of tabs because there's no point. Is your project on Drupal.org?
It's on GitHub. So you could also just go to GitHub. If you go to Foundry, the Drupal one, it should have a link to the GitHub, I think. Somewhere? No, it doesn't. It's just how to install it. But if you just go github.com/realityloop/foundry.
Let's see if I got it right. All right. It's still not kicking in.
And you don't get the link because you haven't enabled it on GitHub. So, hang on, let me...
By the way, the secret here. Oh yeah, entity browser enhance. Okay. Yeah, this is how you know what someone's doing.
Yeah, I was going to suggest you have a look at that.
I know one thing I'm avoiding, and I see it in yours, is I'm doing those three pillars of structured data, APIs, and SEO. But in the demo, I'm trying to cover content authoring and administration, like using the Gin admin theme to its full potential. But yeah, there's stuff in here I'm very curious about. And yeah, the schema meta tag module is really hard to set up. Like I struggle with that one.
I haven't configured that. I've just put it there. So yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Should I hit refresh and give it another?
Yeah, give it a try. Oh, there we go.
All right.
That was worth doing. So if you, in the terminal at the bottom, just type ddev ssh. Actually, you can just click the ULI link that's there, I think. Command click, all that.
Oh. Okay.
You might need to run it. Oh yeah, that's right. You're logged in. So yeah. All right. So I haven't actually enabled the module yet.
My Chrome does not like that. If I start typing in there, it's gonna die.
Oh really?
All right. Yeah. If I'm, and keep in mind, it's like an M. I got a new Mac, but okay. So what we don't want with the, I mean, we're not going to do, well, we could do Drush if we have these enabled. What do you want me to enable? You just want to see this working?
Well,
I mean,
maybe,
generally you could.
Do you want to quickly look at how content types are structured on a page, or does it not matter? I don't know.
Let me, okay, you know what? Let's do bare minimum here, which is just really schema.org UI. You need the UI.
Yep.
And frankly, the drush command is actually calling the UI to create the forms, and you have paragraphs on here.
Yeah.
That might be the bare minimum. And yeah, we don't even need the report. So yeah, the JSON API node preview tab, I I find that clunky, and that's why I wrote the JSON API preview. Like the code that Contenta had to do that preview inline is so simple,
Hmm.
and you can control the formatting so you can get it standardized.
Yeah.
That the preview tab is a really awkward looking
Well, I
because it's
mean,
rendering it in the
we would
Chrome.
potentially remove that if we were using schema because it has the functionality anyway. So it's
Yeah,
just
yeah, I'd have to pick out what you're working. I don't. I've never heard of Linky.
Linky gives you managed links, so you can go to a report of your links and update them if the
Hmm.
URL changes and things like that, which is pretty good.
Oh,
That's developed
yeah.
by Lee Rowlands, I think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh yeah. A fellow Aussie.
yeah. So he's one of the developers at
Uh,
least. So
yeah.
um,
Yeah. Exclude no title. You have to do.
yeah.
I don't know why it's taking so long. Maybe I should have done it from the
Oh, you
command
hit
line.
save, did you? Oh, and it's not.
I hit save. Yeah. It's just churning.
Oh, okay. Hmm.
All right.
What?
Um. Well, confirm non-stable. Okay. So let's go here. I can do ddev, right?
You're already in DDev, so all you need to do is run drush.
Uh. This question of existing content types, you can see where the challenge might be is like, what do you do with paragraphs? You
Exactly.
see what I'm saying? Like those
That's my
relationships,
because I have
it's
quite a
strong.
few paragraphs and concepts that I have in mind. Why is that not working? That's weird.
Well, what I will say for your paragraphs, your existing content types, you can go in and say, okay, here are the mappings for this.
Hmm. Hmm.
I don't know why that, you're right. All right.
Yeah.
I don't know why that failed, but I only see event and page right now and
Yeah,
paragraphs.
there's only three. There's a whole bunch of paragraphs though. So in that are there, you have to create a
Hmm.
piece of content to make use of the paragraphs. So
All right. Well, let's look at them really quick. A lot of these you can map to simple web components,
hmm.
and that would work. Link, one of the tricks is you might massage the data. That there's a lot of alter hooks. So when you get to a paragraph that's a link
Hmm.
in schema, if you're doing JSON LD, you just want the URL. They don't want the title for links.
Yep.
So you
Well,
probably would have to write bridge.
okay, yeah, that'll be interesting. But it's like if you
I
go
mean,
and
keep in
just
mind yeah.
if you go and add a page
All right,
or an article, it doesn't really
all
matter
right.
page or article or anything, but page is the simplest one. So like I have
What's this?
that as you type in the description field, the marker moves across to tell you that you've got a nice amount of text to in the green area. Um,
All right.
and I put all of the help text under the question marks that are. It doesn't prohibit you
Yeah,
from typing longer, but yeah. So
yeah. I love that part of it. Okay. Oh, and I see you're doing the content creation. So two col. I,
if you
okay. So
expand layout
save.
options, you might. Oh, it doesn't matter. It's so inside the section you see the plus. I don't like the way that layout paragraphs present some of this stuff, but
And we're about to switch to this, and I'm on the.
I just don't like that you don't see anything until you hover over it. So that'll add
Why would
another.
I? Well, okay. So the benefit here is that you're creating actual paragraphs and their entities, and you have all those patterns. Whereas layout builder gets a little dicey.
Yeah, but also because you have the layout paragraphs, it gives you the placement area on the page. And when if you click the pencil on the section, or
Oh, this thing. Yeah.
yep, that'll bring up the And if you expand layout options, you can actually set the percentage widths of the columns and stuff. So
Yeah. Okay. 3 columns.
So I used to have this concept of sidebars for stuff, but now we don't really need it. And then I had a layout of like a full width page or a standard page, but this negates the need for all of that. So
Oh, and now you could put the content in.
yeah.
Got it. And I I really struggle with this because if you really, how do you, so what in your headless thing, someone rebuilds this in the headless front end
No,
when
what
they get the data?
basically paragraphs become components. And so all they have to do is build the page in Drupal, and the front end will understand the context of layout paragraphs. So it'll know
Mm-hmm.
how to do that. And then as you add your paragraphs, it'll have a component for a text paragraph. It'll have a component for a component for a card group, which will pull in cards. So that's really just a way to group them together. And links, it will handle the difference between an internal link and external link. Media will
Mm-hmm.
handle whether it's a video, a document, or an image. And listing is the intention for listing is to embed views. So the
Got it.
idea is that we will configure the views that a user is allowed to embed, and then they can embed them on any page.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I get that.
So
And let's
some
look at
of what
events.
you're doing
What?
using embedding in your WYSIWYG
Mm-hmm.
does it as then you just have a single content area, which
Yeah.
is, there's benefits and negatives to both approaches. The benefits to this approach is you can drag components around and change the order of stuff, which you can probably do in the WYSIWYG as well.
No, I agree with you. Listen, a complex layout with columns,
Hmm.
you want you want this, you want layout.
Yeah.
But if you need to put an entity like a slideshow in the middle of a blog post or an image or a video,
Yep.
you want to embed it. Like that's where I go
Well,
back
so
and
for
forth on it.
us, you would
Yeah.
create text that goes above the embed, then place the video as a component as one of these paragraphs, and then place another text block below that and build it
Yeah.
up that way.
But then you get to, okay, so for schema, if you wanted to give that text, you'd have to rebuild it for schema as well.
Yeah.
If you wanted to do it in JSON LD, you get into that. And by the way, some people have double authoring too. I've seen that a lot now, where here's the text of the blog post, here's the presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's the worst idea. Can I just want to look at your event. So your event,
Just leave.
I'll leave.
Yeah.
So this data you have here, yeah.
That's the smart date.
But yeah, that's smart data. But still, if you were going to put the location and all the meeting information and who organized it, that would be on the node and not the paragraphs.
Yes. Yeah.
So you could use schema for the, this would be an example where you might even use schema now to add the fields.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, these ones are really easy examples because the idea is that basically on an event, you have all of the structured data fields, and then the content area is just if you want to have, any textual content or images that are related to the event, but are not actually the primary stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, it really, the schema stuff just depends on the amount of data your site's going to have. Like for me, I work for a healthcare institution, so they have disease guides, locations, clinics.
Yeah.
And to be able to have all that as structured data is just a huge perk.
Yep. Yeah.
Well,
I'm pretty sold on the idea of it. I just it potentially means a change, with what you just said about that text not being a singular component, being a problem with the schema data. That's the bit.
You'd have to write a bridge. It would be like some way to go through paragraph layouts and extract the text.
Mm-hmm.
Basically you would create if you were going to and keep in mind the JSON LD stuff I know that's an interesting one. Is like, how much do you really need to do with that?
Yeah. Like we wouldn't be using the JSON LD for doing our front end development work. It would only be there for
No.
schema, really. So
Yeah, and you could massage it easily. I mean, from my organization, the challenge is, yeah, you have a head, like, let's walk through the paragraph stuff. You have a headless implementation that's building your front end to this data, but if you want to distribute it to third parties, you kind of need it just to be data with no presentation.
Yep.
If that makes sense. Like,
yeah.
yeah, that, like,
Yeah,
I haven't,
most API used data doesn't really contain presentational information.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just pieces and components that you're stitching together.
Yeah.
I have not done layout stuff with what I'm working on, but that's where my vision, it's like you would build your structured pieces of data and then you'd go into layout and say, here's the pieces I want. Here's all the teasers I want on the page.
Well, maybe if you look at blog, if you look at article, I did kind of have that concept of primary image is up in the meta. So
yeah, author.
I haven't called it the
video.
right thing, but there's a video in case because I've got a YouTube channel. I was thinking I might put videos there, but
and type you're trying to get it more, offer that.
That would be taxonomy,
that's the subtyping.
But there's no terms in there at the moment. But because if we use schema, there would be a list of terms because there's already terms defined for articles, which I like the idea of that personally. So,
and I did start out using the dropdown for subtyping was going to be driven off taxonomy. Literally, like when you installed the schema.org module, it set up an entire taxonomy in Drupal of schema.
Yep.
And frankly, it felt so heavy-handed that I just backed away from it. Because I was like, this is crazy. Just give someone a drop-down menu with key value pairs that they can edit. It's faster to search, faster to filter, easier to understand. So I steered away from taxonomy at that moment.
So, I've got a counterpoint to that thought process in that taxonomy allows you to edit and not care about what the key is. I always steer away from using lists in favor of taxonomy because it allows things to be changed and added to very easily for end users.
I know, and but for schema.org, you'd have to maintain the key.
Yeah.
So that's where I struggled. I was like,
but one way you could do that would be have a hidden field on, you're adding more module weight, but a hidden field on taxonomy that had the relationship to the key in schema.
100% what I started with. Tore out all the code. I tore it all out. I was like, this is...
the thing here is if you're making this decision, you're letting schema be the management of what those terms are anyway. So I don't think it's a problem doing it the way you've done it. Taxonomy, in the way that I'm talking about it and the way that I was thinking about it, is where users are maintaining that. And that's a very different, if you're trying to maintain the schema types, then you shouldn't need to change that.
No, you're totally right. The other, how do you add other to it,
But really, I think any other stuff would be a separate vocabulary that's not connected to schema because it wouldn't have a match in schema anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just ignore it. It'd be a field.
Yeah.
I don't know where distributions are going to sit with this module. It's kind of setting it's a pretty strong opinion on how you should model your data. Keep in mind, even right now, someone could come in and just install the schema.org blueprints module to get structured data in and still use what you have out of the box.
Yeah.
You might steer away from the event content type. You also kind of have this worked out. You would just use schema, and then when you get to the main content.
Well, my plan at the moment is to either implement schema in Foundry by default or not. So, I think it makes sense because, clients always say that they want to have SEO, good SEO. And implementing schema is going to be better than not implementing schema. So
Yeah.
yeah. So really, I'm pretty pro using it. I've just got to work out what does that mean for paragraphs versus content types with things like organizations and people and that sort of thing.
I think you probably can do both and get away with it.
Yeah.
One of the here, I'm just going to show you a mapping because I just want to make the point. Like the challenges that I'm struggling with when you're thinking, like you showed me smart date.
Mm-hmm.
That's a complex field, but then you can only map to one schema.org property.
Yeah.
That's where it gets a little dicey.
Yeah.
And I don't have if I go to export what we created, let me see, go here, schema mapping, and let's look at the TV thing. It's really simple. It's just key value pairs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you needed to extract something from smart date, you might have to use like another field, like the token field or computed field to kind of calculate what property that different fields go to.
Yeah.
And this is right now designed one field to one property.
Yeah.
So
you'd probably have to make a judgment call that we're only going to list the first date or something like that. Is that what you're saying?
Or you write an alter hook and you massage the data. I mean, there's a lot of that going on. There's a huge stack of APIs here that I've kind of sorted out where this is altering when you create something.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually, by the way, that's why I did all the submodules. This is just for using schema.org to create field types. If you go to the JSON LD module, there's APIs when you're generating JSON LD. You can go in on a page, look at the route match, and say what you want to do to it.
Okay, so
this
is where you massage what comes out.
Yeah. And I did it off route matching because that felt like the most sensible thing. Because you can get an entity from a route match. That's what this is kind of showing.
Yep.
There's a service, JSON LD Manager, get route match entity. You send it in. And you can alter the entities. I'm changing little things. You can massage the data. Yeah, you can massage the data. It still gets into this is like a developer-centric tool.
Yeah. Which is how I saw it as well. I don't think that's a problem, really. Like, it's very unlikely that someone would be implementing it as an end user, and even a site builder, it's probably a bit complex for a lot of site builders.
Yeah, my hope would be they would just click it. It would work, and they'd say, I need this content type, and then massage the hell out of it. And to emphasize, I mean, even if you're selling this to someone, the key thing here is once this is created, like if I go to movie, you can change everything here.
Mm-hmm.
You're not, because you saw how simple the relationship we're maintaining is a key value. You can go in here and change it. You're making a decision on the data type.
Yeah. Which is what
the presentation.
That's the thing that we want to do in Foundry is have it be a strong data modeling tool for the developer to build that structure and good editorial experience for the end user. That's really the key things. So I think this supports that.
It does. It does. I think the API side of it, the raw API, helps a lot for people to see that from a developer perspective.
Yeah. The other thing that's cool about Druxt is it actually respects display settings and everything. So you can configure multiple displays and use those displays in your front end. So
it's just mapping. So like basically is it decoupling at the pre-process level? Like you basically get a set of variables and you send them to the front end?
That's a Stuart question, unfortunately. I don't know enough. But basically it's all via JSON API. So it's JSON API, he might have an extra module, but JSON API is giving you the field ordering. It's giving you the display modes. And so part of what we were potentially doing is on paragraph types at some point is when you place a paragraph, you can individually per paragraph set the display mode you want to use for that. And then the front end would just use that because there is a field that lets you pick that. So it kind of gives you flexibility while still maintaining the relevant constraints, which is, that's the problem of content editing experience for end user, is like, let them do as much as they can without breaking the page.
And are you guys going to have preview inside the distribution?
So our long-term goal is to have proper front-end preview. So you actually see what it would look like in the front end, because we think Drupal's preview is not sufficient. So like, it doesn't look like what the front end of a site usually looks like. So
yeah, I know. Well, that challenge, and then can you preview before you publish? Yeah.
Yes, that problem is already solved in other instances that Stuart's working on. So it's not in Foundry at the moment, but because Foundry, as it stands alone, doesn't have a front end yet. We do have, there's a sub-project which has sort of some basic starter kit to give you everything. So it's using Tome with a little bit of stuff, and then it's got actually Druxt in the front end. So it's Foundry Tome Druxt, or something like Foundry Drupal Tome Druxt.
Yeah, so Tome. Okay.
Yeah. So it's under the reality loop.
So what's your, do you mind, big picture? What's your vision for the product? This is going to be what you sell to clients that you currently have, or potential clients, or a product that is it part of your service, or it's a product outside of your services?
So Foundry is, the idea is to be open source, so anyone to use, but it would be the starter kit that we start projects from. And, at some point we may look at productizing it. Like, we want to have, Druxt is also open source and not a reality loop project. It's just something that, Stuart works on reality loop time. So essentially we're sponsoring some of the development, but he does a lot of work in his own time on it. But they will likely be fairly closely coupled, because we only use Druxt for builds now. So, at some point we want to have probably some services that use those things as SaaS products. That'll be our making money type thing.
Yeah, I know. Well, look at a Site Studio. It's ridiculous, but that does seem to be a direction to go in. What other distributions out there are going in this direction? Or you guys are on your own, like fully headless distribution?
I mean, I think Content. Oh, I don't know if there is any that, like.
Yeah, no, yeah.
We've used Contenta, and like one of our client sites uses Contenta, although we've basically uncontenterized it and made it Druxt now anyway. So it was installed as Contenta.js profile, but Druxt is driving all of the front end now. So,
and Druxt is Vue.js in the front end.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't used. I've dabbled with React a little bit, but they're all the similar.
So the Druxt.js demo, all the code is available on GitHub, and that's basically the Umami. That's basically how to get to 1.0 is replicate Umami experience.
Yep.
So he's pretty close to 1.0, I think. So
yeah. My to-do list is to get all the default content from Umami.
Well, it's recipes, so it shouldn't be that hard. It's primarily recipes and articles.
And that's literally next week I got to start working on, because I'm scaffolding all these types out, but it would be good to have a mechanism to populate them with default data, especially if an organization is going in this direction. They're going to want to see their content in this structure. Like my healthcare institution has lots of disease information that's unstructured, and I have to sell them on structuring it. So we're gonna have to kind of demo that. Well, I'm really curious to see where you go with it. I mean, my timeline, it's hard to commit to anything. I want to have an alpha by September. And what's funny is I'm planning on tagging an alpha release and then just tearing out a bunch of code. And the reason I want to do that is I want to get, like, there's modules in here where I'm like, I don't really need the flex field. I like it, but I don't think I'm going to go live with that.
Yeah.
But I want to have like a release that just has that archived.
Yeah, yeah.
So if someone
Yeah.
wants to come back to it, it's there.
Makes sense. Yeah.
It's right. Like I felt like that would be a good way to approach this. Get it there, get it into alpha. And what's funny is, to me, the challenge is getting the baseline configuration settings right enough so that someone could go live with a website.
Hmm.
And I think it has to be a real implementation of this for it to get a stable release.
Yeah.
It seems crazy, right? You can see where I'm going. It's like, how could you tag a stable release if someone doesn't go all the way with it?
Well, I mean,
Where,
this is why I would like to get into Foundry, because we've got a project we'd be planning on starting that is due for delivery ideally before the end of the year. So
mm,
um, that's why, you know, I want to get Foundry to the point where I don't want to make much in the way of changes to it other than doing security updates on modules and stuff. Ideally, that's the.
mm.
So we've got a couple of issues open about some cleanup things, but yeah.
Well,
So,
I mean, one thing, so technically speaking, if I can uninstall the schema.org blueprints module completely as it is right now, and nothing would change on the site.
yeah.
Nothing breaks.
Yeah.
It's interesting if I was doing a new project and I was like, okay, I want to be skeptical, I would, the only change I would make is I would turn off that prefixing. The schema prefix is just a configuration setting, and it gets, if I show it to you, it's under search meta here, settings, properties. It's disabled because I started using it.
Yeah.
But if you haven't started creating schemas, change this to field underscore, or we could debate whether we just don't do this, because then you're fine.
Yeah. I mean,
Especially if your project doesn't, like, they're not like, we have to have JSON LD.
yeah. What benefit does that give other than just being aware that that is a schema field?
That's it.
Yeah.
The subtyping, I think I detect it because it's really hard to figure. I probably, I'd have to look at the code, and we just have to see where
But
that
even
subtyping is being
if
used.
you've generated with prefixes and you turn off this stuff, everything still works. It's just got those schema.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then when you start to maintain the site, you're going to have fields with different patterns.
So, like, I'd almost argue against not having it. Argue for not doing this just because of that. I know that it's helpful, but it's not. It's not a required thing. You could easily, couldn't you just have a report that shows the schema ones somewhere?
You could,
Yeah.
yes. I totally agree. I did it because I want us as a community to distinguish between what's data, what's real important data, what's fields, and what's configuration. And like the example when I say that is schema, the stuff we're talking about that's the schema, the structured data. The sections, that body content, that kind of gets into fields. Like, these are pieces of data pulled together. Yeah. And then configuration to me is everything in the right-hand rail sidebar.
So if we're looking at, let's say we look at Foundry, well, I guess the differentiation here is that I think, hopefully that hasn't spun down because it does idle down after a certain amount of time, but oops.
Let's see. No, I'm here.
No, it's still there. So I guess the differentiation I'm trying to understand is, because I think I did ask you before, do you often need to add extra fields? So if you're not adding fields, wouldn't they all end up being schema underscore?
Yes. Except if, I listen, it's something you could create a ticket for and we could just discuss. I mean, that's the point of the whole, like, it's so easy for me to change that decision. I mean, keep in mind, there's a module out there that gets rid of field underscore altogether, because
I would love that.
You know that module, wait, it exists.
Yeah.
And the module's point is there's only 7 field names that create conflicts.
Yeah.
It's like created date, language, lang code, and node ID, where you would be like, it's going to conflict.
Well, I'm never going to create a field called that anyway. So
yeah. It's There's a module, yeah.
Yeah, I want to know the name of that because I would.
Drupal remove field prefix module. There it
Remove field name
is.
prefix.
Yeah, it's been around for a while.
Because I mean, to me, that lets you have better field names because they don't have that. You don't have to like abbreviate them as much. So
Yeah, it's just, yeah, look, this person's right. This prefix is a soft convention used in core.
I mean, there's an argument to can we not just do this for 10? But yeah,
Yeah,
they probably
I,
won't.
I think it would throw things off. It's the same thing as can we not call dot module and
Yeah,
call it dot module dot PHP?
PHP. Yeah,
Like get away from that.
yep.
Um,
Well, yeah.
no,
Anyway,
yeah, you could definitely convince me to back out of this. So I would take it for a spin. The demo stuff, the Drush commands would probably be worth playing with because for you're going to have a client that has whatever sector they target, there's going to be a dozen content type. I wouldn't use it for a client unless you could see like a dozen plus schema.org types that map to their
well,
business
in this
model.
instance, they're probably not going to have that many.
Yeah.
Hang on, I've got an Excel spreadsheet somewhere. Where's that
Oh,
window?
and for the recording and the record, I have deliberately not touched commerce at all. I
Yeah,
am
this
not
site
going.
doesn't need commerce either, so that's fine.
Yeah, the commerce guys can handle that when they're ready.
So the entity types I've identified for this client is page, event, a guide, which is like a fact sheety type thing, meeting
Hmm.
group, meeting instance, meeting member, which would be covered by like people and stuff probably.
Yeah.
A service, which is a paragraph type and may not even need to be, but there might already be something that makes sense in schema.
There's service that's already in the demos. You
Yep.
go to the organization, it scaffolds out
Okay, cool.
job posting, service channel, service. Yeah.
Yep. Contact, which is in the context of this, is really just the multiple. It's people essentially. So
All right.
document for media, image for media, video for media, and then location, which is for their contact us page, which would have, the address, the hours that it's open, and things like that. So it's not. I mean, that's 13 entity types, and there's a couple more I think that aren't on this particular sheet, but I think it's enough.
Pretty easy. Yeah, it's pretty easy for you to pump those through this and create a drush command that just spits those out to
Yeah.
see what works.
Yeah.
Um, I would try. I mean, I am going with this like it should cover 80%.
Yeah. Well, I
And
mean, I want to put it in as something we start off with, even if we're using Foundry, starting with just page. So because seeing how easily you were creating those entity types, I think that's what we were looking for scaffolding out stuff when you're starting from scratch anyway. So
yeah. Something I need help sorting out, which is really powerful, because if you want to talk SEO for someone, is let's see if I can mock it up. Like schema, that's why I have the dashboard, not dashboard, but this report.
Yeah.
If we go to web page, it offers this, let's see, this like level of specificity that you can navigate through your site and kind of tag your pages differently. So your contact page.
Yeah.
If you had the subtyping on, I mean, these are big SEO gains.
Yeah. Yeah.
And FAQs are really powerful now because here, yeah, it is a good pitch to your client. I got to say
Yeah.
let me get to the demo. I'll spin one up. It's a drag to have a report and a configuration page that has to be called schema.org. If I get to the demo, where's the FAQ? It's sitting. Here it is. It's web. and now we go here, you get like a perfect FAQ page with perfect SEO. So when you go in here, it's paragraphs.
Yep.
Question 1, answer.
The
Oh,
funny thing is,
multiple.
we just,
Yeah.
like yesterday with the client, identified that there's no need for FAQ pages if they make the content good. So,
Oh, if they, yeah. Well, the thing is, you could argue they should still have an FAQ page because if this is structured properly,
yeah,
and
it
by
will
the
come
way,
up
there was a nuance.
properly. Yeah.
This just so an LD gets picked up and becomes a search result.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if
Yeah,
you
that's
write
good
your
because
questions right,
it's getting the individual item. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Frankly, you'd have an FAQ page that's what is blah 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 services.
Yeah. Yeah.
We offer blah blah blah. So when
Well, I mean, I was calling it a service, but there's no reason it couldn't be structured as an FAQ because it is essentially a service was the idea of a title and some descriptive text, which is what an FAQ is. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I saw. Yeah, and you. By the way, I'll just throw a bug that this is bugs we have to sort out. This somehow didn't become a multiple value. You see, it's only supporting
Yes.
one. We've
Yeah.
lost.
But
I'd have
is that
to
just you have to
figure.
go and edit the content type and make it?
Yeah, you'd have to go back in, but this is a configuration. So just to, like, the mistake happened here when I
Yeah.
created the paragraph. It didn't work right. If I go into here, I have to look. If I inspect this, I think it's main entity.
Yep.
Right? Main ent.
Mm-hmm.
If I go over to here, and this is giving you like, if you guys do this, you're going to have to understand all the, go here, go to settings, go to properties, and default properties,
So you need to comma
FAQ main entity. Oh,
questions,
this
comma,
is
unlimited
the
one.
mistake.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here you go.
Yeah.
That was the mistake.
Yeah.
And of course, if you were in the YAML, it's so much easier to read.
But if you save that now, does that fix it?
No, you'd have to catch it.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, one thing to be very clear is once you create something, it does not go back in and touch anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
After. So the APIs, like once you say here's a field and you put it on, the API, the properties added to the API, it's exposed. The name will never change.
Yeah.
The label will never change. It doesn't touch.
Yeah.
Your existing rules. Because and we have to be really careful of that. I'm glad I was able to fix this. This is what I expected to happen in every demo I do where something's a little off. And this is that opportunity to be like, yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question here on the UI? Is I have this for a site builder. I think it's the only way to do it, unless I build out a whole complex. Like you have to click on each FAQ, enter. You get a form and you fill it out. I could make a toggle where someone could get to YAML here, and let them toggle back and forth between the two.
I think that would be okay. You just have to validate it before they saved it, wouldn't you? Yeah.
Which is hard because then you have to write you have to come up with a YAML schema validation.
Yeah.
Like I almost want someone to help me sort that one out. Well, okay. It's late for me.
Yeah. No.
This is the funny challenge. If there's little things you need to nudge to make this more stable for your uses, just put tickets in and let's do it.
Yep.
I don't. We could create meta tickets for things like that. Like we could track kind of, I don't know, a group of little features, like that whole discussion about schema underscore prefix.
Yep.
But I don't really want this to be like, I want this to work. I want someone to start, use it, and that's it. It takes care of all their content data needs forever. And like nail the pattern. And frankly, I'm pitching this as like, if you do it this way, you don't ever go back to your data. That's it.
Yeah.
Drupal is your content authoring, content repository. You're never changing this. You're going to have it for 10 years unless you go off to another CMS. And I even in your strategy, how'd you put it? You could use paragraphs layout. If layouts got better or another system came in, you could maybe migrate that, but the event data would stay the same.
Yes, yeah. Well, my take on that is at the point you're moving to a different system, you're going to migrate data in and rebuild those relationships if you need to do it anyway. So it's not,
Yeah.
but having like schema, like having schema compliant data should make that easier anyway. So
I
because
tried to get this to work with Sitecore. That was such a disaster.
Yeah.
It was hilarious. Like their UI didn't support multiple value entity references. It was crazy. You had to say I would like to have 20 links here
Oh my God.
and call them link 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was, and this is a testament to Drupal because every single piece of data I've needed to model is not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Paragraphs is great.
Yep.
Like I haven't ran into something in schema. I'm like, how the heck
I
do
think
I
for
do
me,
this?
it's going to be like the paragraphs I have. Can I turn them into something that's a schema thing? Like a card, there should be something in schema for a card type thing I would expect. But
Yeah, if you go to the block types and go here, I started doing some research there. So if I go to add block type, these are what I found. So there's
yeah.
quotation, web content, and item list so far.
Mm-hmm.
You can also do collection pages for slideshows. That's where I think slideshows should be nodes.
Yeah.
It's very hard to like tuck it into a paragraph because then you get into. Keep in mind you're in a headless situation. So what if it has a URL in Drupal?
Well, then it exists in this XML sitemap potentially. So it depends on how you're building the
That's a
XML
fair.
sitemap. So, but yeah, I mean,
That's fair.
you could still do it in paragraphs, I think.
Yeah.
That's the.
Have you ran into like a throttle like with paragraphs if you get up to like let's say you're building a page and you have 10 components with a slideshow with 10 images and like does paragraphs at some point just start slowing down? Because I mean we know the Ajax is a little kludgy in Drupal.
So we're trying to stay away from nested paragraphs. So we've sort of set this internal thing of no more than 2 levels of nesting ideally. So what you've seen with card group and then cards is the deepest level of nesting there should be. And so that would still work for a gallery. You could have a gallery paragraph that you add images to, which are media images. But definitely there is an impact that's caused by paragraphs because essentially it's loading entities for every paragraph. But the way that Druxt work is it progressively loads what's required to display the page. So it's quite performant and also things get cached. One of the real benefits of Druxt is we have a clear pathway to statically generating the sites. So, all of those problems become redundant. It obviously depends on the site's content and how it is used, but you can also do progressive static generation so that, my hard drive is going to run out of space, but for recording.
Okay.
But basically you can have, huge chunks of the site be statically generated, but the views listings with filters and stuff, if they need to be, can not be static still. So
I definitely want to hear more. I'm going to have to, my organization's going decoupled slowly. Yeah. We're figuring it out.
I'm sure Stu will be more than happy to give a demo of Druxt. So
let me, I have to gradually warm up my organization. It's going to take a couple of quarters. This quarter, what you're seeing now is what I'm doing this quarter. Is just
that's all right. I mean, more times only going to mean that Druxt will be more mature. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, this is great. Let me sign off. Post the video. And by the way, I'm doing my typical thing that I will add the video to right here.
Yep, that's fine. I'm going to have to edit my son coming into the room and me yelling at him out of it, but that'll be fine.
Oh, feel free to edit whatever you want. Edit my son's underwear. It's no big deal.
It just looked like he had shorts on, so I think that's fine.
Personally.
Yeah. So, Yep. Cool. All right. Well,
All
I'll
right,
probably
cool.
get to editing that video sometime next week, but it shouldn't be too long. It should be easy because my audio will be in a separate track, so it'll be very easy to find where it's happening.
Happy someone else is doing it. It's not something I do. I record my videos in one shot because I can't
Well,
edit them.
that's my intention, but my son doesn't
Yeah,
respect that the door's closed, unfortunately.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
All
All
right.
right. Well, thank you for your
Have a good
time,
night.
Jacob. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
And yeah, we'll
All right.
definitely keep in touch.
All right. Cool. Take care,
Take
Bernie.
care. Cheers.